Hey, so good evening. It's great to be here. The camera in the Dharma Hall is exactly at the perfect height tonight, and I can see everybody in the Dharma Hall. It's so neat. So glad you're there. It's really cool. And if you're wondering what's in the background, this here I'll do this. That is the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, India, where the historical Buddha is said to have awakened. And so there's right behind that, there's a large temple, and then there's very large grounds, and then around the grounds are a walkway that's elevated, so you can see the elevation that you're looking down at the. So this is from a pilgrimage we did in 2007. And we did one in 2007, 2014. We were going to do one in 2021, but of course, COVID got us. So, for anybody who's even faintly interested, I'm working on um, kind of a moving retreat pilgrimage uh, sometime in the next couple of years. So, if you're interested, send me a note and let me know, and I'll keep you on a mailing list. So, after the sitting tonight, we're going to talk about a topic which I think is um, really interesting. It's actually a lot of fun, and it's quite valuable if it works for you. You know, there's all these different practices, and some work for us and some don't. But it's about a wisdom practice of using our thinking as an object of meditation. And just right off the bat, I think it's a provocative question. Like, thinking plays such an enormous role in our life, and as a practical matter, we're thinking frequently, if not almost all the time, and don't actually know that we're thinking. We wake up to the fact that we're thinking, but all of those thoughts are actually having an impact on us. So this will be a discussion about trying to bring that up to the level of awareness in a number of different ways and actually use it as a direct and immediate object of meditation in the same way that we would use physical sensations or feelings or craving, and then also how we would do the same thing basically in everyday life. So if there's something of value in there for you. And I'm sorry to hear about Ellen's passing. I had met her but didn't know her well, but it's obvious that there's a lot of affection for her. And um, I've come to believe that we should certainly honor our sadness and grief when we lose someone. And we should actually rejoice in their contribution to our life and other people's lives and be thankful, be grateful that if they were suffering, particularly from the illness that caused their death, that they aren't suffering anymore, that's come to an end, and they've been truly liberated from that. So I'd like to have all of us just uh, dedicate the sitting to her. And if you knew her, see if you can just hold her in your heart during the sitting. So I have a filter on so you wouldn't hear a bell if I hit it. And so at the end of the sitting, I'll just bring us out of the sitting with my voice. So take a few minutes, not just a few seconds or a minute, but a few minutes to actually arrive. And the first part of any sitting is allowing all of that energy that you bring in with you to the Dharma hall or wherever you're sitting. And the focus that most of us have had up to this point of being primarily external is to just allow those to begin to settle. And so the energy calms down and stabilizes, and the attention and the focus begins to slowly shift inward. And I find it a helpful practice to actually make that an object of meditation, to actually watch this initial stage of letting go of the outward focus, letting go of keeping the energy in an outward focus, and then experiencing that settling and that calming and that concentrating. And as that starts to happen, it fits with how you feel tonight and your practice setting and intention that your mind and your mindfulness will recall during the sitting to have the mind really bright and alert so it can experience and explore the different experiences that come into the field of awareness. So not just noting them or observing them, but the experiences that come into the field of awareness being experienced in the body and in the mind and investigated, explored. So in the last few minutes of the meditation, you can begin to softly bring your awareness back towards into the more concrete reality, a more concrete dimension of awareness that we work with in daily life. And if it feels helpful, you might do a gentle experiential inventory and notice the nature of the energy that's in the body and the mind right now, and the quality, the sharpness or the lack of it, of awareness, and how the body feels. That can frequently give you a little valuable information about the sitting. And then whenever we're ready, we can begin to slowly open our eyes and come back into the group as a whole. Okay, so thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break, just like 5 minutes. And then when you come back, we'll jump in on this evening's discussion. So see you in 5. Okay, so I think we'll start. And again, welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation to sit and be with you tonight. Uh, Tonight's talk is going to be on thought and thinking as an object of meditation, and simultaneously as an object of attention in daily life. And it's an exploration of the nature of thought and thinking and the role it plays in um, our perception, our understanding, our happiness, and our suffering. And I'm hoping that you find this interesting and helpful. A lot of this will sound familiar, um, and a lot of it is just a change in trajectory of the way that we're looking at this, which I find very helpful in my own practice and my own life. I found very valuable. So the first time that I actually encountered the idea that there was a different way of relating to and thinking about thinking was quite a while ago in 1967 when I was a sophomore in college, and I walked into a bookstore. I loved bookstores, and I was looking around, and I randomly saw the title of a book entitled The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts. And at the time, I was such an insecure kid that the title really caught my attention. Like it made no sense to me at all. And it was my first real look at Buddhist and Buddhist psychology, and the idea that you could relate to thinking and use it in an entirely different way. And there was one particular part of this book that has really been a touchstone and stuck with me to this day, and has been an organizing principle for a lot of related teachers. And what Watts was talking about was, and he was talking about pain, both physical and emotional pain. And he was saying that if you directly and immediately experience the sensations uh, of pain, whether they're the emotional pain that's expressing itself in your body or the physical pain that's in your body, without mediating it through thought, without thinking about it, and just staying with the direct and immediate experience, that it completely changed the experience, and that something happened where it was no longer, the mind didn't relate to it any longer as suffering. Um, so that really captured my imagination intellectually, and I started working with it. And of course, this is a core Buddhist idea that a thought is a thought, and the value of it, whether it points us towards happiness or towards suffering, is what we do with it, and particularly what we add on to it. So over the years, I had to deal with a lot of fairly intense pain, surgeries, knee replacements. And I think some of you know that 18 months ago, I broke my back with a big fall in 5 places. And the aftermath of that, the pain was just extraordinary. When I got home, I like reaching over to pick up the TV control, I'd pass out. And uh, every place else in the house that you can think of, being on the toilet, reaching over to get some toilet paper, I'd pass out. And so what happens with pain, whether it's physical or emotional, is your mind develops a whole story about it. So they told me not to pick up anything more than 5 pounds. And I like Coffee Mate creamer. So they have one that's like 2.5 pounds. So I thought, well, that's just no problem at all. So I took it out of the ice box and found out that like 2.5 pounds, I couldn't do that. Um, so then I just made it exactly what we do in meditation. I made it an exploration. So I put it on the sink, and if I was 2 feet from the sink, uh, could I pick it up with that angle of leverage, or um, was the pain too much? And well, how about 1.5 feet? Or if I picked it up at the bottom or the top? And what I made a practice of is not to believe the thoughts about it and the emotional reaction, which of course were don't do it. If you do it, not only are you going to hurt yourself, you're probably going to pass out. And I just resolved that what I would do is actually learn from the direct, immediate experience and allow that to guide me. And so it is just transformational, because quite quickly I start seeing that there were so many of illustrations of what my mind was telling me that were just untrue. Uh, it was an effort to protect me, but they were inaccurate. And if I had followed them, I'm quite convinced that my rehab would have been another 6 or 8 months long. I moved through rehab on my back amazingly quickly. And I attribute it to this practice and mindfulness, in this practice in specific, of actually being present non-judgmentally for the experience that is taking place without adding anything to it. It's kind of revolutionary for me. So that's what I want to talk about tonight. And thought, of course, is a natural function of the mind. It's one of the 6 senses, in the same way that noses smell and eyes see and ears hear. Minds think, and they do it all the time. And in not just in life, but in Buddhist practice. Thinking is pivotal. Being able to create a really good and sound conceptual model of the path of practice and the underlying psychology so that you can test your direct experience against that is foundational. So it's critical, and so is cognitive insight. Uh, and the reverse is also true. Thinking can be devious, can be a trickster, it can be a troublemaker. Uh, it's frequently complicit with the ego. Uh, you know, it creates a bubble that we live in, and we keep repeating something that is self-centered, and we believe it. My own opinion is this is at the core of so much of the trouble we have in our country right now. And the repetitive nature of it reinforces, I think every person here knows this, can reinforce in a very unhelpful way anxiety, depression, loneliness, self-criticism, self-judgment. And the historical Buddha was very clear about warning about this. There are suttas on um, uh, right view or skillful view is frequently called uh, skillful or right thought, because view is an aspect of thought. And there are suttas on right view, right thought, wrong view, wrong thought. There's a sutta where the historical Buddha lays out 62 wrong thoughts or views that his guidance is that if you adopt these and you frequently adopt them unknowingly, they will incline your mind towards suffering. Particularly if you repeat them, you'll make a world of suffering. And it's kind of a provocative question. Well, what are the 62 views? How many of us know what they are and have looked at that? Uh, so I think it's a provocative question since thought plays such a significant role, and the Buddha was clear about that, is in our life, in your life, how much attention, effort, curiosity, practice goes to looking at the role that thinking is playing in your perception, understanding, suffering, and happiness. So what this discussion is about is bringing that all up to the level of awareness. And rather than do a bunch of theory, I'm going to go right into um, recommendations about sitting in practice. And some of this will sound really familiar. It's a little bit of a review, but I'm trying to set it up so we can see, well, how would we add this element of making thought an object of meditation into the traditional process? So some of it's going to be review, but I hope you find it interesting. So the very first step for all of us when we sit down is to anchor our awareness. And so whether or not, and I'm taking this from a Vipassana Theravadan perspective that we use in the West. So in the meditation process, after we get settled, we tend to use something as an anchor, whether it's our breath in and out of the breath, or the body as a whole, or the alignment or the balance of the body. And the purpose of that is to have something that's stable and alive and changing so that we can experience that and explore the qualities and the characteristics. And then a critical part is that it helps the mind stay concentrated. So we're focusing on the breath of the body or the alignment of the balance. And then if our concentration is good, when something else comes into the field of view, an emotion comes in, a feeling, a thought, and it actually intervenes. It's strong enough that we see it, and it's stronger than our focus on the anchor, where it disrupts our focus on the anchor. Then we turn our attention to that. So that key aspect of being able to see something that comes into the field of view as separate rather than identifying with it is the key element of the meditative process and is really key to the practice I'm going to recommend. And the analogy I like to use on this, we probably all had an eye exam, and they put you in front of a little box, and there's a square box, it's a blue screen, and there's a red dot in the center, and they just do your left eye and then your right eye, and they say, focus, just keep your attention on the red dot, and if anything comes into the field of awareness, press this button, and then that gives them the scope of the breadth of your ability to see objects. And so this is, I think, a great analogy to anchoring in meditation. We're keeping our attention in the breath and the body, balance our alignment as an exploration or just to concentrate. And then that's the thing that allows us to see what intervenes. So to apply that to thinking, the way we would do this is the thing that would intervene is thinking. So we're in meditation or we're in daily life and we actually see that we're thinking. And while this intellectually sounds pretty easy, I mean, my own experience is that it's not as easy as it sounds. And I want to give you a little illustration. I took my 12-year-old grandson over to the coast for his birthday, and we hung out for a couple of days in Santa Cruz, going in the water, the lighthouse, the boardwalk, the whole thing. On the way over, when you leave Sacramento, you have to go through Davis, and there's a causeway, and there's a major highway reconstruction project that's going on. So where you normally have 4 lanes, it had been narrowed down to 1. And it's basically mid-morning rush hour. So for as far as you could see in front of you and as far as you could see in back of you, I mean, miles of cars completely stuck on the freeway. So, initially, being honest, initially I was pretty good with it. And then after like 20 minutes of not moving, my mind really started making a story about it. And I actually, then noticed, I actually heard that I'm starting to verbalize this. And it's, like, I can't believe this. This is so messed up. I mean, this really sucks. Um, and then I woke up, mindfully and watch what was going on and saw that every time that just the feeling of frustration or aversion, I allowed that to go into an expression. It sucks, or I can't believe it, or, how could they do this? What have you. It would immediately ramp up the intensity or the depth of the feeling. And, all you have to do that is repetitively 4 or 5 times. And now you're really frustrated, where before it was unpleasant. I mean, now it's really unpleasant. And so that was fascinating to me because I think this is happening to us all the time, and we're not aware of it. And the other thing that is kind of a recognition dawned on me is that if I'm doing that, it must be having an effect on my grandson. So it's not just that I'm ramping myself up, but that I'm actually potentially influencing or imprinting something on him. So that ability to distinguish the thought from the emotional reaction and realize that the thought, just like in the illustration that I had mentioned earlier, may not be valid, it may not be true, or it may be emotionally true, but it's not helpful. So being able to, we call it discern, but to deconstruct the thought as a separate thing and realize that it's just a thought and you have a choice about it. And in this case, it's really unhealthy if you don't see it. But if you can't see it, you can't work with it. So this is the next step, where you're talking about if it comes into the field of awareness, you actually have to develop the ability, which in my experience is at first is not that easy to see it. And there's a quotation that I read a long time ago from a Tibetan teacher whose name is Namkhe Norbu, that I really liked. And you've probably heard something like this before, but I think it's helpful. And he says, the nature of the mind is like a mirror, which has the natural and inherent capacity to reflect whatever is set in front of it, whatever comes into the field of awareness, whether beautiful or ugly, but these reflections in no way affect or modify the nature of the mirror awareness. It is the same with the state of meditation. There is nothing to correct or alter or modify. What the practitioner does when entering into meditation is simply to discover themselves in the condition of the mirror, the condition of awareness. So all of this should sound familiar, but we're adding thinking as an object of meditation in the same way that we'd previously been using physical sensations, feelings, emotions, cravings, attachments, identification. So what happens when we see that we're thinking, meaning that we're in the content of the thinking process? And I'm going to use another quotation. This will be the last quotation from U Tejaniya, which many of you may be familiar with. He's a Thai teacher, Thai monk, and I really like him and his presentations because they tend to be so clear. So I'm going to read this twice. It's short, but it's really, really helpful. And it really frames the issue. And he says, if desire or aversion arises because of a particular object that comes into the view of awareness, so that could be, a memory, it could be a thought about an argument that you're having with someone, it could be something that someone did, it could be something that we want. So the mind is focusing on that. So he says, if desire or aversion arises because of a particular object, you should stop focusing on that object. It is not a Dharma object. It is an object of desire itself. The object you need to watch in such a situation is the desire or the aversion, not the object of desire or aversion. Okay, so if desire or aversion arises because of a particular object, you should stop focusing on the object. It is not a Dharma object. It is an object of the desire or the aversion itself. The object you need to watch in such a situation is desire itself. So to apply that to tonight's topic, that means that thinking about, you're sitting in meditation and the thought or memory comes up of what a person said or did. A driver on the freeway was speeding and pulled in front of you and it felt dangerous. An ache or pain in your body, a difficult memory, a discussion that you're dreading having in the future, an unexpected financial setback, any of these that you're thinking about, having a memory about, projecting, is not an object of meditation. It is an object of the underlying emotion or what lies beneath whatever it is. It's what's causing so all of these, everything that I just mentioned, are symptoms. They're not a cause of our suffering or our struggle. So we normally think, well, gee, somebody said X and it was so inappropriate and that's the cause of it. From a Buddhist perspective, from the standpoint of Buddhist psychology, it's not a cause, it's a condition, and it's the trigger that is causing desire, aversion, attachment, identification to arise. And the desire or the aversion, the feeling, the attachment, the identification is what's causing the suffering. So the attention in meditation shifts from the symptom to the condition that's causing the desire, the aversion, attachment, identification to arise. Okay. So we're shifting to looking at the underlying cause or condition, what underlies or is behind the thinking. So desire and aversion, how it arises, how it influences the response we're having, how it causes suffering, how it comes to an end. And specifically, the process itself of feeling, craving, attaching, identification, and suffering, that sequence. And then seeing that really directly, not as a thought, not conceptually, not intellectually, but immediately and directly in our body. And then that leads to insight. So how could we do that? I mean, that all sounds like, okay, I've got that intellectually, I'm supposed to shift. Well, what would that mean? And so what it would mean in this context is that we're looking into the nature of thinking and thought itself and how it's influencing our suffering and our happiness. We're not trying to change it or do anything about it. That comes later. If we can't see it, we can't work with it. The purpose of sitting and using the same method in daily life, the experiencing it, the investigation of it, is to lead to insight, to understanding, experiential insight. If we can't understand it, we can't heal from it. We can't work with it skillfully. We're just dealing with the triggers. We're not dealing with the causes. So there are three basic and powerful ways you can do this that should all sound familiar. Whether or not we're actually using them is another thing. But they should all sound familiar, and they're based on this mirroring idea that we see it, and then we go in to investigate it and explore it. So the first one would be when a thought arises and you see that the mind is going into the content, that you shift the focus to how is the thought expressing itself in the body and in the senses. So where is it felt? What's the intensity of it? And so all of the tools that we have to investigate sensory awareness, that there's a location, that there's an intensity, there's a depth, there may be temperature to it, it changes, it moves, all of these things. And then if the mind goes back to the thought, we shift back down into the body. So that's one that should sound familiar. And for me, that's my practice of choice, because I strongly believe that this is, as taught originally, a body-based practice. And so this shifting and getting into the habit of constantly going into your body, then you really become familiar with the trigger and then how the trigger expresses itself in the body. The second one, and then of course, all of those bodily sensations are related to craving, identification, states of emotion, feeling. So you can, by going into the body, the mind will identify those. So the second is causation itself, that you have a thought go into the body and you see that it causes a feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, or that it's causing a craving, desire, or aversion. And so you're actually discerning it, identifying it, not solely as a bodily sensation, but as part of the chain that leads to identification and suffering. So with craving, which is a desire or aversion, it arouses the mind. The mind, the Buddha used the phrase, it inflames. So it inflames it either to go after it and want it, or to just the reverse, not want it and hold it off. And then the next stage up is attachment, where the mind starts holding on. And because it's holding on and it's energetic, the mind starts to become agitated. The arousal turns into agitation. So then you can identify that as attachment, and then you move into a sense of self, which is just a form of attachment. It's dampening down. And then almost invariably, when the sense of self, I, me, mine appears, that there's an effort, there's an energetic and a physical and psychological and emotional sense, you can feel it all, to manage and control everything. So that would be the second level. And then the third level would be, just the major, there's three major characteristics, anicca, anatta, dukkha. And so you could use as a focus, watching that thoughts just keep changing. They're coming and going all the time, thankfully, that they're not permanent. And that's the focus. Or you could see the role of the appearance of the sense of self in pointing the mind towards struggle. And when it's not there, when there's thinking that doesn't have that pointing is not there. So these are three different dimensions of meditative experience that my guess is that everyone here is at some level familiar with. And of course, we don't do them all at one time, and we have to cultivate each one. But those are three foundational ways in basic practice. So there's three others that are really interesting that really look at thought, the quality of thought, and kind of tell us where we live. And I'm just going to go through them really quickly. The first one is, as a practice, when thought appears, that you just look at it and notice whether or not it's actually kind of organic, in the sense that you woke up and you're just thinking, and you're not thinking about anything in particular. It's just, rolling thinking. So yeah, you see that thinking is happening. Another thing that could happen of its nature is that you wake up to the fact that you're thinking, and you see that it's just reactive thinking, and you can't let it go. And the third kind of thinking is that it's intentional or purposeful, that you're choosing to do it, even though you're in meditation and you wake up and now you're thinking you don't want to be there. That wasn't the purpose, but it is intentional thought. It's purposeful. So just starting to watch that over a period of hours and days and months, it's really a fascinating thing, because you start to realize that there are proportions of your time and effort that are going into these three areas, where your mind's just randomly thinking, and that it's reactively thinking, or that it's purposeful. And my own experience is, when I first started doing this, it was really surprising, because you have some kind of generalized idea about what your mind is doing, and frequently it's different than what actual observation is. That's the core of Buddhist practice. So the first one would be the nature of thought itself, whether it's organic and just happening, reactive, or intentional. Another one, and this is different than noting, you'll hear this used as a way to basically calm thinking down. And in this context, as an object of meditation, it's not trying to calm things down, it's to actually discern the quality of the thought that's present in relationship to time. And there's basically three time windows: past, present, and future. And my own experience is, and then working with people one-on-one fairly intensively doing this practice, is that most people find that if they do this over, if they give this a chance over a period of months, they find out that they spend a disproportional amount of time thinking about the past or the future, and that the actual amount of time that they think about what is actually happening right in this minute is quite small. There may be all kinds of thinking about what's happening right now, interpretations of it. There may be engaging it through thought, belief, different views, a narrative that you have, but actually thinking about the experience that's taking place for most people is quite small. Well, I don't know about you, that was shocking to me. And people wake up and they find out that by doing this, that they're spending tons of time in the past either lamenting something or wishing things were the way they were, or they're spending lots and lots of time in the future projecting things and producing lots of ongoing floating anxiety in their life. So these are extraordinarily valuable insights if you have them. So the first one is the nature of thought, whether it's organic, reactive, or purposeful. The second one is time, past, present, future. The third one is the focus of the thinking itself. And you're not diving into the thinking. You're just when it appears. I mean, you're already in thought, and you just notice the content. And it's the three would be repetitive thinking, thinking that is self-centered. It's about I, me, mine, or thinking that is basically story making. And this is another, for many people, watching this over a period of months, another like very dramatic thing. I mean, people really begin to see what this whole sense of self is about and how powerful it is and how dominating it is, and for many people, problematic. And seeing that how much repetitive thought they do, either about the past or the future, projecting, and then particularly the story making. We're making up so many stories and living in the moment through the story. So the easiest illustration for tonight would be with my breaking my back. My mind was making up all kinds of stories. And if I try to lift something up, I'm going to pass out and then I'm going to hurt myself and I'm going to have to go to the emergency room again. And it's like, okay, enough already. Can I pick that up or not? And just be very, very careful and see what's true and what's not true. It's just the truth of my own experience. So when you combine these basic practices about thought that we already have with these qualities, my experience is that you start to see thought habits, of self-judgment, self-criticism, and those translate into how you relate to your body, your behavior, and your speech. I at one time, and this comes up occasionally now, but I was very focused on my self-appearance and my weight, and couldn't seem to get a certain amount of weight off or be where I wanted to. And I just started noticing that when I would walk in the bathroom, I'd look in the mirror and my mind would say to me, "Hi, fatty." And in a very unpleasant way, a very nasty way. And, at first, I mean, I didn't even realize that it was happening. And then I realized that I was actually really identified with it and that it was an expression of, loathing, and it had turned into a fixed view or a belief. So you start to wake up to that. You wake up and you're thinking and you go into your body and you see that frequently with thinking, what it does is completely disconnects you from your body. You're numb. So it cuts you off from all of the wisdom that the body has, particularly alerting you to things. This idea of waking up to how much time you're spending in the past or the future and how little time you're actually spending in the present is just extraordinary, particularly when you start seeing how much you're living through ideas rather than experience in the present. Starting to become really aware that when you think certain thoughts, you feel constriction in your body and immediately move to management and control, which is coming from a sense of self that wasn't there a moment before. So it's just such a valuable, alive practice. And I'll just say this one thing, and then I think we'll have a few minutes for discussion. I have a rule in dealing with this, and it's called the don't know rule. And what I mean by that is um, the practice of making an object of thinking is not a thinking practice. Um, all of these things that I've talked about, you're seeing it come into the field of awareness and identifying and discerning it through direct, immediate, spontaneous, nonverbal, pre-verbal experience. So if you find that you try to do this and you're going, well, gee, was that the past or was that the present? Or I mean, was that causation? You're already lost. Now you're thinking. So in the same way that insight, when something comes up and you experience it and you know it's aversion, or you know it's desire, or you know it's attachment, that's what we're talking about, that direct, immediate, spontaneous recognition. And so that's how you're doing this. And at first, it's a little awkward. You know, you have to develop, like every aspect of practice, you have to have the conceptual model that you're then testing. So at the beginning, you know, it's helpful to memorize some of these categories um, so that you don't have to think about them, in other words. And I think what I'll do, if there's enough interest, uh, I'll just put together a little chart of these three basic approaches and the three qualities of thinking uh, approaches that I talked about. So I think I'm going to stop there, and we've got time for just a little discussion, hopefully, if you're interested. And so I'm going to open it up to the floor.
Thank you, Dennis. This is Jen in the meditation hall. Question from Philip, and then we'll try and toggle back and forth to Zoom too.
Hi, Dennis. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Yeah,
So
hi, Philip.
I am definitely interested in having your chart that you just mentioned, and I have no idea what the mechanism would be to get that out into the Sangha. I hope we can discuss either with Adam or Robin or Marcia a way to make that happen, because I'd love to have that information. And thank
Maybe
you
we
very
can
much for your
just,
talk tonight.
you know, this is recorded and posted, so maybe we can just make it an attachment. That's what we do in Sacramento. So, but that's up to you guys, whatever works.
Another question or comment from the hall?
Hi, Dennis. This is Douglas.
Good evening.
I'm considering the repetitive thinking, a lot about the future and, how I think about what I want to be doing tomorrow or next week. And part of it is planning and scheduling. And part of it just gets to be, since I'm not doing anything about it necessarily, be kind of like troubling the repetitiveness of this thinking, And I found that if I just write it down, it kind of takes it out of my head, and I don't have that as much repetitive thoughts about a specific item that I may want to do. But my real question is I was thinking about like the Buddha and repetitive thinking and planning, and wondering if it's possible, and if in his state of consciousness, if he was living in a completely spontaneous experience, or if there was like, oh, we're planning on going up to Vulture Peak Mountain next week, put it in my schedule. Or is there a more spontaneous way of living in this life experience?
To the best of my knowledge, they haven't found the Buddha's notebook or calendar yet. So that may happen at some point, but in all seriousness, a comment about repetitive thinking, and then secondly about spontaneity. The Buddha had a special word for this repetitive thinking, which is papancha, which generally translates as mental proliferation. And generally, what it means is that the thinking gets to a point where it's no longer helpful. So, the issue isn't that there's a problem with thinking, it's essential, or that there's a problem with planning. It's that at some point that, and I think writing it down is actually quite helpful, but you do the initial of what your planning is, and then that you have something to anchor your attention is, and then you have another thought about it. You can go back to what you've written, or you can go back and look at it and reflect on it and revise it. So you start to develop a sense of confidence that you don't have to, the mind does, that it doesn't have to keep thinking about it. Because what's behind planning and repetitive thought is the urge to create some kind of stability and certainty. It ultimately comes out of a sense of anxiety. So
Yeah, I might call that control, wanting to control.
yeah, and management and control. So developing a new habit, but the starting place from a Buddhist perspective is that you have to actually see it and understand what prompts the mind to do it. So, I mean, we may know that we have lots of repetitive thinking, but when you sit in meditation, there are specific conditions that moves the mind from not being engaged in repetitive thinking to moving into repetitive thinking. So it's that kind of experiential exploration which leads to insight, which gives you a different understanding of it, other than, well, I just have repetitive thinking and it drives me crazy. And then the second step is doing something about it. But most of the time, the conventional mind wants to figure out how to do something about it, not understand it. And the core of all these practices are designed to first deeply understand it at an experiential level. And then the sense about spontaneity, I think what happens, I mean, my own experience is that as the mind settles in to seeing that by understanding, suddenly solutions appear that the conventional mind would have never produced. That by understanding in this experiential way, that I suddenly have a larger view of events and have wider choices, that there's a sense of confidence that develops about the ability to be in experience and allow the experience to lead to the conclusion. I mean, this is the illustration would be with my back. Once I was able to stop the urge to listen to the thought or the emotion, the whole rehab thing was actually quite, actually it was pleasant. It was exciting because then the mind becomes curious. Like, well, what is the truth of this moment? Like, well, what do I do to point my mind in the right direction rather than, oh, I want to stop that voice. So I think the wisdom is built into the process of these practices. That's my experience of them. So, okay, well, listen, I want to thank you very much. I think we're at the end of this. There's so much suffering in the world right now, and geez, you have to be careful when you turn on the news what space you're in. And we have things like Gaza with, not a couple hundred, but a couple of thousand children died in Gaza today. Nobody's even talking about that anymore. So, we're in an amazing time, and there's lots of suffering, and we have, friends who are part of this natural cycle of being alive and dying, like Ellen. And somehow we have to hold it all with a great sense of not just compassion, but a sense of awe of this extraordinary opportunity we have to have this level of awareness in this life. It's just an extraordinary gift. And so that we, we can deal with all of this, and we can hold people that we love and care for, like Ellen, who have passed, we can hold them in our hearts. They're not actually gone at some level. So I want to thank you, all of you for your practices, because, Thich Nhat Hanh all the time would say that the only way that we can change the world is if we change ourselves. That's the start, because we change in here, and then that ripples out to the person next to us and our family, and it ripples out into the community. So each of us are doing that, and then as a group, that's what Mountain Stream is doing. So this is really, in my opinion, kind of sacred, holy work. So thank you very much.